This is New Zealand, located deep in the southern part of the Pacific Ocean, about 4,000 kilometers away from Australia. It is the second most peaceful country in the world. New Zealand is very famous globally, particularly for its vast mountain ranges, beautiful lakes, and high-quality organic food. Some of you may already know that the famous movie The Lord of the Rings was filmed in these beautiful valleys of New Zealand. The weather in New Zealand is quite similar to that of the UK: mild summers, long winters, and considerable rainfall. However, despite this, New Zealand's population is not even 7% of the UK's population. If you look at the map of New Zealand, you'll notice that nearly 80% of the country is completely uninhabited. About 75% of New Zealand's population lives in the northern part of the country, and 50% of the north's population resides in just one city, and that is Auckland. With such an amazing climate, breathtaking scenery, low crime rate, and high standard of living, why is 80% of New Zealand still empty? Let's find the answer to this question in this video. First, if we look at the world map, you'll notice that New Zealand is extremely far from the rest of the world. For example, if you board a flight from Karachi or Mumbai, you'd have to cross the entire Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean, and it would take around 18 to 22 hours of flying to reach New Zealand. And now the question arises that how did humans even reach such a distant island in the first place? There are multiple perspectives on this. If we visit New Zealand's official website, it states that around 1,000 years ago, approximately between 1320 and 1350, the Maori people discovered New Zealand. The term Maori refers to the people who lived on the various islands of the Pacific Ocean, commonly known as the Polynesian Islands. According to official sources, the Maoris left their original islands in large canoes around the 13th century and arrived in New Zealand. This period roughly coincides with the era when the Mongols and Genghis Khan were expanding their control over much of Eurasia. But a very interesting question here is that why did these people leave their old islands and come to New Zealand? When we researched about this question, we found out that there is some difference in the traditional stories of Maori people. According to Maori traditions, New Zealand wasn't discovered in the 13th century, but actually 500 years earlier, around 750 AD, by a Maori named Kupe. Kupe was a fisherman who used to catch fish for himself and his tribe. But eventually a problem began that whenever he would cast his nets, the fish were eaten by octopuses that lived in that area, leaving them with nothing. Since fish were their main source of food, this caused serious issues. To solve this, Kupe and some members of his tribe decided to venture out into the ocean in search of a new island that had a better supply of food and resources. In this quest, Kupe set out into the Pacific Ocean with 20 to 25 men. After a few days of sailing, they saw an island with large mountains. This was New Zealand, an island rich in seafood, sheep, goats, and fruits, and completely uninhabited by any other human. It was a perfect place for Kupe and his tribe. Kupe then sent a few of his companions back to the Polynesian Islands to inform the rest of their people about this discovery, and so the Maori people began to settle in New Zealand. Until the 17th century, the Maori lived peacefully in New Zealand. Being isolated from the rest of the world, they had no enemies and faced no external threats. But all of that was about to change very soon. This was the time when Western nations were expanding across the world to increase their power. Explorers were being sent out to discover islands, countries, and continents so that European powers could seize them and strengthen their global influence. As part of this movement, a Dutch explorer named Abel Tasman set out into the South Pacific Ocean in search of a continent. At that time, Europeans believed there had to be an undiscovered continent in that part of the world, and if found, it would open the door to countless opportunities for European nations. In 1642, Tasman discovered New Zealand. However, when he tried to land, a violent conflict broke out with the Maori people and he was forced to retreat. Later in 1769, a British officer named James Cook arrived in New Zealand while searching for the same continent. Once again, fierce fighting broke out between Cook's soldiers and the Maori people, and several Maori chiefs were killed. James Cook had to return, but this time he created a detailed map of New Zealand and his entire journey. Using this map, Europeans began arriving on the island during the 18th century. This time they dealt with the Maori in a much smarter way. By offering trade and profits, the British gradually started building naval ports, and within 100 years, the British had taken full control of New Zealand. In 1840, a treaty was signed between the British and the Maori people known as the Treaty of Waitangi. After this treaty, New Zealand officially became a part of Europe and the British Empire. At that time, the Maori population was around 200,000, but over the next 100 years, instead of growing, this population declined to just 40,000. There were two main reasons for this. When Europeans arrived, they brought with them diseases that were common in Europe. The problem was that the Maori people had no immunity to these diseases. As a result, after European immigration, many local Maori began to fall ill and die. In the 19th century, New Zealand became a very violent place. Just 5 years after the Treaty of Waitangi, a series of wars broke out between the British British and the Maori over land ownership. These wars lasted for 40 years. Many Maori were killed, and the conflict only ended in 1881 after most of Maori chiefs had been killed and the Maori resistance was brutally crushed. Eventually, the British realised they couldn't move forward without involving the locals in the development process. So soon after the wars ended, the British government began including the Maori people in everything from the electoral process to key development projects. And this marked the beginning of New Zealand's journey toward peace and progress. But then, as shown earlier in the map, why is such a large portion of New Zealand uninhabited? And why does most of the population live only on the North Island? The main reason the southern region of New Zealand is empty is because living or building in that entire area is nearly impossible. New Zealand's southern part is dominated by mountain ranges. The terrain is so uneven that even building basic infrastructure like roads is almost impossible. On the eastern side of the mountains, the land is extremely dry and infertile, which makes irrigation unfeasible. This is why the majority of New Zealand's population resides on the Northern Island. To solve this issue of low population, the New Zealand government relaxed its immigration policies after World War II. Before World War II, non-white people were not allowed to enter New Zealand, which caused the population to remain stagnant until the 1950s. But once the restriction was lifted, people from Asia, especially China, the Philippines and India, began settling in New Zealand, which finally led to a much-needed population boom. Today, nearly 27% of New Zealand's population consists of immigrants or people born outside of New Zealand. Most immigrants live in or around Auckland, which is why Auckland has become one of the least affordable cities in the world, because supply is low and housing demand is high. To address this problem, the New Zealand government is now offering grants to encourage people to move 100 kilometres away from Auckland to the Waikato region, with the aim of easing pressure on the Auckland housing market and stabilising prices. Then there is another interesting fact. New Zealand's entire agriculture industry runs on animal meat exports. Thanks to the frequent rainfall in the North Island, the land is lush and green, making it ideal for raising sheep and cows. New Zealand's human population is around 5 million, while the cattle population is estimated to be nearly 30 million. That's why New Zealand is the world's largest exporter of mutton and sheep wool. About 95% of New Zealand's meat is exported, and in 2019, these exports generated around $46 billion in revenue. New Zealand is the 50th largest economy in the world, and agricultural exports are its primary source of income. Earning $46 billion from just meat exports is unbelievable, and it should be a source of inspiration for many other agricultural countries. If you enjoyed today's video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. These are the sources we consulted for this video. See you in the next video. Take care.